What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Bond's apartment. I, of course, am Luke, not even screwing around. There he is. Ryan, analyze this, Mr. Bond. How are you, buddy?
I am doing phenomenal, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Always. You know what? I think we just talked about this not even 8 seconds ago, whether I should bring you in or just start with it. And I think subconsciously, and now you can see what I'm using to shield that. It's a box of hangers. I think subconsciously the reason why I didn't is because, and we're just going to dive right into this. We're going to talk about Denis Villeneuve, and we're going to talk about Amazon's casting a Bond under the age of 30. But to say that you predicted Denis is actually an understatement, I think, because you really dove into that on social media. You kind of really had your case. What made you even think? Outside of something, we see that he's a Bond fan and this and that, but why? I feel like you caught on to the idea that not only does he, like someone like Christopher Nolan, and I'm doing the worst interviewing ever right now because I'm just talking. But Christopher Nolan, we know Christopher Nolan would love to do it. We know Denis would love to do it. But what made you see and think of Denis and say, you know what, this is the director that I think it's going to be, and here's why?
So there are a few things. I can't take too much credit. So first off, I'm just going to put it out there. If anybody's been paying attention, there is Matt Belloni runs Puck News, and he's an entertainment journalist, and he is a former editor for The Hollywood Reporter. He is very well connected, and he's been doing a lot of the good scoops around the Amazon takeover, about the hiring of David Heyman and Amy Pascal as the producers. So he's been proven right enough that I'm listening to what he says. So in many ways, he's leading my attention. But Denis Villeneuve, and I'm trying to say that right. My French pronunciation is always abysmal. My girlfriend speaks fluent French, and I'm always atrocious, and she's wonderful. I cannot speak French for the life of me. Yeah. However, Denis Villeneuve, he's been in the conversation for a while. Like, he's been giving interviews that he's been wanting to do a Bond film for ages. We know Eon Productions had conversations with him. Daniel Craig, as far as I've heard, actively pursued him aggressively to do No Time to Die after Danny Boyle parted ways with the production. So he seemed to be kind of like the first choice after Boyle walked. And that kind of put him in the conversation. The one thing I had kept hearing from friends who are kind of plugged in loosely is that the one directive that David Heyman and Amy Pascal were getting was Amazon wanted them to get a name director, and whether that was going to be Christopher Nolan or Alfonso Cuarón or Denis Villeneuve, it had to be someone that was going to create a lot of excitement. And Denis Villeneuve made a lot of sense. He just wanted to do Bond. Alfonso Cuarón, who had been in talks, had given interviews about potentially wanting to do Bond, but he seemed a little bit more hesitant. Denis Villeneuve, like Christopher Nolan, made no bones about it would be a life dream to do a Bond movie. Right. And honestly, if you're talking about the directors who are big right now, Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve are in the same conversation. That's the tier of director we're looking at. So when Puck News reported that Denis Villeneuve was one of the top names that was being looked at, the math made sense for everything outside of the timeline, because he's committed to the Dune series. He's wrapping up the third film as we speak. He's kind of getting ready to shoot that, and that's going to take him into the next year or so. And that was the only reason Denis Villeneuve seemed like an open question mark, is that he had prior commitments.
So I'm wondering if that's what hindered him from doing No Time to Die was Dune. It must have been, right?
Yeah. Again, this is not these are all the rumors that are out there. We've never had him come on record and say this. Right. But my understanding is that when he was approached to do No Time to Die, he was really excited about it. He really wanted to do it. He's a huge fan of the Daniel Craig era. He loves Casino Royale. He loves Skyfall. I think he really wanted to help them wrap up that era, but it was that or he had to bail on Dune, and Dune was his lifelong dream, and he was going to say, I'm finally able to make my Dune film a reality, and it won out. And it was the smarter move for him from a career perspective by all stretch, because now he's been able to have his cake and eat it too. He's gotten 3 Dune movies, and he's going to be able to launch a brand new era of James Bond. That is quite an impressive situation to be in.
Yeah, that's as good as it gets. Now, my question is, do you think that, and kind of piggybacking off my initial question as why, because essentially what I'm getting at is for the viewer, Ryan's social media posts and YouTube videos were tailored at some point to specifically Denis. So it was kind of like Ryan had this inkling, whether you read it on Puck News, which I definitely would have thought was, a hockey website, but, whatever it may be, you were kind of like, this is kind of where I'm leaning towards, and here's why. So do you think another reason for Denis Villeneuve making the most sense is we're also seeing this kind of, I don't know if you've seen this little tidbit, but it kind of sounds like Amazon is not giving him creative control, and he does not have like final cut.
Yeah.
Where Christopher Nolan, that's an absolute no-no for him. So is that another thing that you've kind of heard prior? Or now that you're hearing it, you're kind of like, well, that just further makes sense why this is the choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have heard things off the record about the Christopher Nolan situation, because conversations definitely happened there. And even recently, we've gotten reports that from Variety that Amazon was definitely aggressively interested in Christopher Nolan in the conversations that happened since they acquired the rights. But we had heard previously in the rumor mill that one of the reasons it hadn't worked out when Eon Productions was still running the series was that Christopher Nolan was pretty staunch about he's not going to do a movie unless he has final cut. That's like a red line for him. And that's limiting. And certain directors have come out and said they don't love that. Sam Mendes has made comments recently reflecting back on his Bond movies and has, he's proud of what he did, but he also knows that he had to compromise certain things that he wanted to do because he didn't have absolute control. And here we're clearly in a position where Denis Villeneuve was willing to play ball. I still think, and I'm curious how you feel about this, that he's a big enough player that he's still going to have the loudest voice in the room over this film. I don't think it's the same situation with Eon Productions where you had Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson being very strong creative forces in the room. I think David Heyman and Amy Pascal are more true producers, so to speak. But we'll see. We'll see exactly what that dynamic shapes up to be. But I think he was willing to meet the terms of the contract that Amazon wanted, and now he's got it.
Yeah, I agree, and and then the Christopher Nolan thing too, and they've made it once again, and I shouldn't say they've made it clear, but the rumors are that Denis is only getting one film too.
That's true, though it could be a Sam Mendes situation where it's like, if you knock this out of the park, we're gonna beg for you to come back,
right,
and I wouldn't be surprised. My understanding is, and I don't know if this has changed, that when the agreement was signed, also David Heyman and Amy Pascal were only signed for one initial Bond movie. So Amazon seems to be taking a kind of wait and see approach with this creative team to say, okay, let's get this film out of the gate, let's make it successful, and then kind of evaluate.
Yeah. See, and I'm okay with that, because I also wouldn't want them to do what they did with Star Wars. Because they're okay, so you got JJ here, you got Ryan Johnson here, you've got test the waters. You've hired the best director you could. Like, obviously, they're probably going to go out and get a stellar cast. And no matter who they choose for Bond, it's going to be a talking point. Some are going to love it. Some are going to hate it, no matter who it is. Whether it's Tom Holland or Theo James or Aaron Taylor Johnson, there's going to be people who don't like it. But regardless, they're most likely going to surround that Bond with incredibly high-end talent. And you know that the cinematographer, and you're probably looking at your Jenkins or your Hans Zimmers or whoever it may be, you're going to get the best of the best. That's
right.
No question. So for me, it's like I would just absolutely lose it if this movie is highly successful, not just financially, but critically, and they just allow everybody on it to walk outside of the cast, and I'd be surprised, but I think that would be a huge mistake because I don't think it worked out very well for Star Wars.
No, it didn't. And I would think Amazon will move heaven and earth to keep people on board if the film is the success that they want it to be.
Right.
And I want to ask you how you felt about the Denis Villeneuve possibility as those rumors started going, and then we got the official announcement out of nowhere, right? It just kind of like landed in it felt like a press release just came out of the blue. That the one thing that feels really exciting about it is like I have reservations about Bond 26 and the anxiety about it versus my own particular taste for what I want it to be. But I think the one thing that's abundantly clear is that when we get to this film's release, it's going to be a proper event. And it feels like Amazon is pulling out all the stops there. They want the big director. I'm sure they're going to get, like you said, like Denis Villeneuve is going to be able to pull everybody in, that all the big names, anybody's on the table. This will be a big, what we might call like a prestige blockbuster.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting, given that it was unclear what Bond 26 would be. We at least know it's going to be a huge deal.
Yeah. And that's where I think, the want of Christopher Nolan. I mean, I not in like in a mean way, but whenever I'm thinking of somebody famous, I think, and my mom loves films, but I would say, Mom, do you know who Christopher Nolan is? She'd say, yeah. I said, do you know who Denis Villeneuve is? She'd say, no. But you and I do. And he's a mega, mega superstar director. But Christopher Nolan makes sense for them to want to go after it first because there's, it's like, it's a Tarantino movie. It's a Nolan movie, so it's like, you're also bringing in people who just want to see more Christopher Nolan work. People who love the Batman series, all these different things. So Denis is, I think, dare I say, ever so slightly more artsy than Christopher Nolan, if that makes sense, but able to do it on just the biggest scale. And whether it's, he's a household name or not, which for cinephiles, of course he is. And for moviegoers, he, by now he should be. Christopher Nolan's name just carries a different weight. But for them to hire him, I agree completely. Like the marketing, I'm hoping it's like Skyfall marketing. I want just everywhere. I mean, the way they've marketed Formula One has been incredible. And the film was amazing. It's awesome. But like even, it's like the first ever haptic trailer. Did you see that on the iPhone?
No.
So you can actually watch the trailer and it's got vibrations.
Wow.
It's insane. And it's like, if you properly market a movie as big as James Bond, you're going to make your money back, even if the movie's not fantastic. Formula One happens to be pretty damn good, but it's going to be divisive because of who they hire. But I think a lot of those people will still go see it because it's a Bond movie. I mean, I wasn't thrilled when Daniel Craig got hired. I was pissed. I mean, I was young, but I just didn't. Brosnan was my guy. I did not like it. And then, of course, I saw Casino Royale and, everything changed. But I think, and this is probably a good segue. These rumors is Tom Holland, Jacob Elordi, and Harris Dickinson. This Variety posted, this is a Variety article. Variety, as we know, carries a lot of weight. I mean, a lot of actors don't like Variety because of the critics, but if it's one of those three guys, Tom Holland especially, I would say, like, I feel like there's going to be a lot more people upset than happy about that news. What do you think?
I have been posting about it on Instagram. I have yet to see a positive comment about it.
I was going to say the same thing.
I have yet to see a single positive comment about it. Now, I like Tom Holland. He's a likable guy.
Yeah.
Realistically, I don't think he's necessarily going to get it. So, but I don't see it. I don't see Tom Holland. He's a nice, affable guy. But my one criteria about Bond is Bond needs to have a darker side. Even if you're looking at the lighter Bonds, we're talking Roger Moore or Pierce Brosnan, they had the ability to kind of flip a switch and still have moments of cruelty in ways
like a true assassin.
A true assassin, right? And even as goofy as Roger Moore is, he could still believably kick a car off a cliff and make it look really intense. And I don't see that with Tom Holland. The other two are more question marks. I have seen the work of Harris Dickinson. I've seen the work of Jacob Elordi. I'm not necessarily like, oh yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. But I'm also not so instantly like, it doesn't get my back up the way that Tom Holland nomination does. And the way the press seems to be going is everybody's leaning on the Tom Holland stuff. I am too, for engagement. For those of you who are out there, I have done a few Tom Holland posts just because I know
doing it for the gram,
talking about it. But I don't know how you feel about it. My suspicion is that yes, this is an actual Amazon wish list that some executive at Amazon MGM has put together that exists. I'm certain that conversations happened with Denis Villeneuve, that one of the first things he would have been asked in the rounds of vetting interviews with Amazon MGM is like, who do you see as James Bond?
Right.
And we had heard rumblings, and I thought it was just getting like confused with the video game. I didn't put a lot of stock in this, that the Bond focus group was going to be a little bit younger this time out in the way that things were going, especially after David Heyman and Amy Pascal came out. So I have a feeling this type is there's probably something to it in the sense that Amazon is probably looking for, let's say they're 29 years old now. They would be like 30, 31 by the time the movie is in theaters. It sounds like Amazon is probably looking for that type, but I doubt it's one of these three. I think these three are just symbolic of what Amazon is looking for, is like, we want a hot up-and-comer that is going to be younger, is going to be able to do these movies for a while, is going to be, is going to really feel like they're going to help establish a kind of like new world, which Villeneuve is very good at. I don't know how you feel about it. So I really want to hear how you feel about that possibility, because I don't mind that. I mind the idea of Tom Holland as Bond, but I don't mind a 30-year-old Bond necessarily in a movie. And I think age isn't really necessarily an indicator of whether this person is going to credibly carry the role. They just have to be conceivably threatening and appealing and charming and all the things that I would want Bond to be. And I'm also open to being surprised. I didn't think Heath Ledger was going to be a great Joker until I saw the trailer. Daniel Craig being James Bond was kind of like, that just kind of came out of nowhere. I trust David Heyman, Amy Pascal, and Denis Villeneuve to do casting well. This is a group of people who know how to cast a movie. Whatever you want to say about Amy Pascal's producing career, she has known how to cast a film. The series she's done are cast very well. David Heyman cast the Harry Potter films. nobody has problems with the cast.
No,
of the Harry Potter films. So I trust the intelligence of these people, but like for me, Tom Holland is a strict no, and the other two are kind of, they just feel like names that were picked out of a hat a little bit. So how do you feel about it, Luke?
So for starters, I mean, we could have done a whole separate, like, and it's funny because, you know, when David and I did a video on a trailer, I got that comment from somebody like, oh, you can make an hour-long video on a trailer. But I hate to say I could make a series out of just this Variety article.
Yeah.
So for starters, they say in the Variety article, Amazon wants a younger than 30 British actor, and then they list off 3 actors, one of whom is Australian. So it's like you've already, within 2 sentences, completely negated what you just said. But we get it. Lazenby was Australian, whatever. We get it. However, you very easily could have chosen somebody else instead of Jacob Elordi when you're trying to make your point, because you've negated your point. But then when you look at those 3, the best of the 3 is Tom Holland, because the kid can carry, and I'm not saying as Bond, I'm just saying in general, he can carry a series. He was incredible as Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And then you look at Denis Villeneuve made his 3 biggest movies. Well, we'll say right now his 2 biggest movies with very young actors, including Zendaya, Tom Holland's girlfriend, Timothée Chalamet, Austin Butler. So then you could say, okay, I understand the under 30 thing. I really get that. And he's obviously very in tune with working with people of that age that are mega superstars. But then you got Amy Pascal, who cast Tom Holland. So then that's when the wheels start turning. And somebody asked me the other day, what would you think? And I said, well, of the 3, it's Tom Holland, but I don't want any of the 3. Like, and I love Tom Holland. I think Tom Holland is fantastic, but I don't want any of those 3. And then of the 3, the only one that has any sort of like historical, like the way that they had cast in the past, is Harris Dickinson.
Yeah.
Yes, he's been in some movies. Like he just did the one with Zac Efron, and then he just did the one with Nicole Kidman, and you know, both like, you know, darker dramas, not comedy. You know, it's like, and you're like, okay, and he's British and whatever, and you kind of can't see it, but then next thing you know, all of a sudden you probably can. He's got the most. He's like aligned with what they've done in the past. They've never just gone out and been like, let's get the biggest young actor ever. You know, like let's get friggin' Spider-Man. Like they've never gone out and been like, and this is identical to Henry Cavill, but in my opinion, Tom Holland is a substantially better actor than Henry Cavill. Well, this is the thing. Tom Holland's like his classically trained, like theater, like Henry Cavill is not. So it's just, you know, Henry Cavill is like that movie star, and then Tom Holland's like, this is a young movie star that can really act, and you're bringing in a whole new demographic, and it's all this different, for lack of a better word, shit that they've never really delved into. But historically speaking, the only one of the 3 that makes sense is Harris Dickinson. But even still, I don't like that casting either.
So Dickinson is interesting to me. I can see it. If you were really going to do a very dark, like Fleming version of the character, really trying to like go for a true, like, kind of, let's say the brooding killer 2.0. So like Craig's successor, in a way, of somebody who is like going to be in a shadowy room, look like he wants to murder the heck out of people in the room, and like kind of have that really dark aspect. I can see Harris Dickinson doing that. I struggle to see Harris Dickinson doing the more charming movie star aspects of Bond. And every Bond has been a little bit different. Not everyone has been like an out and out movie star. Timothy Dalton wasn't. Daniel Craig wasn't. They kind of grew into the starring role. But that would be the challenge for me with Harris Dickinson, is Harris Dickinson just doesn't feel like he's not to demean him in any way, doesn't feel like he has leading man energy. Maybe in the same way, he feels like he would be a really great supporting character in a movie, you know, like something like that, it's hard for me to imagine him taking on the mantle of a super charismatic guy. I could see it in some ways. Like the movie that I think Harris Dickinson probably comes the closest to, which not everybody has seen, is Triangle of Sadness, where he plays a more clean cut guy. But even then, it's hard for me to see him like doing one liners, and it just doesn't seem to fit. But he does fit the Eon Productions profile. Like he seems like somebody that they would have plucked out and really wanted to screen test at the very least. And in that way is perhaps the most interesting of the three, because I feel like he's kind of an unknown quantity, but I could kind of see part of it, and maybe he would rise to the challenge with Denis Villeneuve like helping guide what he wants out of that performance and everything, and maybe that would click. But it doesn't fill me with like immediate confidence, right? No. It's not, if it was announced tomorrow, I would be like, keep an open mind. But I'm gonna need to see the proof will be in the pudding. Well, in that way.
And that's the thing too, is that's how it was with Daniel Craig. And I don't think Amazon wants to be in that business either. Daniel Craig is a movie star, but when he was cast, nobody liked it. I don't think Amazon went out and got the biggest director on the planet to then go and find, you know, a Harris Dickinson, and for the next year and a half for people to be like, well, we'll see. Like, they want people to be like, this movie needs to come out now. We can't wait. You know, and Jacob Elordi is, you know, and I agree with you too that, you know, it's so difficult, because the Tom Holland thing just, it makes sense for him to be the poster boy of that article because of the various connections he has. You know, his girlfriend, potentially fiance wife, is a megastar that's been very close to the hip of Denis for years now. Amy Pascal, so it makes sense. But Jacob Elordi is that, like, yes, he was great in Saltburn, and yes, Euphoria, but it's like, you know, there's kind of a problem with Euphoria. A lot of people don't take a good chunk of those actors seriously because it's just kind of like a very angsty teenage show. Now, yes, it's a wildly dark and highly inaccurate version of high school, but it's like a lot of people don't take Sydney Sweeney seriously, even though I think she's pretty damn good. And she's done a good job of like saying like, hey, I'm going to produce and I'm going to do all these, you know, she's taken an approach that most people would not think somebody with her kind of look and assets and all these things would do. So, and Zendaya is also in Euphoria, and Zendaya is also fantastic, but it's kind of like the Jacob Elordi, like, I think, rather than talking in circles here, I think they did something specifically with each of those actors. Tom Holland's the biggest star of the three by far. And he's charismatic and he's charming, he's good looking and whatever. Then you've got Harris Dickinson, who's that Daniel Craig, like, yeah, he's been in some things, and oh, that is the one that was in that movie with Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White, or oh, you know, whatever. And then Jacob Elordi's like that heartthrob that all the younger, you know, that younger generation loves, and but it's like not one of those three really fits that mold of Bond completely. You know, like they're all like off base, but in different directions, if that makes sense.
They are. Like, I've heard Dickinson's name before this thrown around, but like I never really saw any of the three as Bond, and Elordi would never have occurred to me at all. And in some ways, he's kind of like the most traditional Bond version of the three, right? Because he's tall, handsome,
dark features,
would look great in a dinner jacket in a still frame. Like, it's very, I can see it, but I think your point that it's kind of like if Elordi is like kind of like if Robert Pattinson had been cast as Batman immediately after doing the Twilight movies. It's kind of like he's at that stage in his career where he hasn't like done enough to build a rep. Robert Pattinson did a very like good job of building out like okay,
he very calculated with the films he chose. Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's part of the challenge of casting somebody that is 28, 29 at this point, because they just aren't going to have what we have come to expect from a Bond actor, which is like a pretty good roster of work behind them. They're younger, right? So they haven't been active in the way that I would expect. Like even Daniel Craig, when he came to the table, he had been in a bunch of stuff. Nobody had seen a bunch of it, but he had like a bunch of stuff. Once Daniel Craig was announced, I was able to like immediately go like start checking stuff out. It's harder to do that with actors who haven't been in the biz
Right.
for another decade, right? Like, and that is the interesting question. My prediction is that this is really like the type they're going for, but to go back to Puck News and Matt Maloney, who had cracked a lot of the stuff with Denis Villeneuve and all these stories, he said that they're not really going to cast the role until the script is in place, and they're looking for screenwriters now, right? So that's like 5 months out. So I would expect 5 months from now, they're going to pretty much audition every single male British adjacent actor between the ages of 29 and 31, like in the entire industry. Like I expect everybody who is vaguely in this profile will get an audition somewhere and we'll hear about it. Because I can't imagine them just even settling on somebody out of the blue. Like they're going to want to have vetted every single one of these. This is the most like iconic role that will be cast in the next 3 years. So,
right. And it's like you can even look at that article like clickbaitish.
Mm-hmm.
The Harris Dickinson thing still just doesn't make sense because he's not very clickbaity yet. You know, it's like even somebody like Leo Woodall would have been ever so slightly more clickbait, having been in White Lotus. You know, just something like very mainstream that it's like everybody watches White Lotus. Like everybody's seen White Lotus. So it's like it's just, and the Tom Holland thing. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about, because, and you're right too, it's very difficult because I think another thing, because as you were making your last point, like somebody like Paul Mescal, so he is somebody that, or Paul Mescal, however you would say it, Irish, so that counts, obviously Pierce Brosnan. He looks like he's 32, 33.
Yeah.
You know, and you've seen him just incredibly jacked in Gladiator.
Yeah.
And he is clearly very, very talented. Somebody like him would be more appealing to me than Tom Holland, just because Tom Holland is, I don't know if he's just too damn famous, or if we just get really nitpicky and think, well, maybe he's, a little too short, voice is a little higher pitched, very boyish kind of features and charm. And, it's like, do you see that dangerous side? And don't get me wrong, Tom Holland's a great actor. He could probably play dangerous, but do you believe it? Where with Paul Mescal or however you say it, you'd believe it because the guy, he's an intimidating dude. And Gladiator 2, I mean, he was incredibly jacked, and that is a darker role. So it's kind of like, it's I don't know which way to go with the criticism almost, so for my question to you is, between Paul, I'm just going to call him Paul because I don't want to keep mispronouncing his name and get shit out in the comments, but between somebody like Paul and somebody like Tom Holland, and just use them as examples. So you've got rising star, definitely more like on the manly kind of end, and then you've got already a megastar, slightly more boyish. Which is the lane that you think would make more sense?
To be honest, I don't know. I would think Amazon would have wanted a name, because if they wanted a name director, wouldn't you want a star that people are ready to show up for?
Well, and that's the thing too. Will Denis make a film without a megastar in it?
Maybe. There were definitely, like, Timothy Chalamet, or I should say Timothée Chalamet, was definitely, a known quantity when he was cast in Dune, but he wasn't, like, I was kind of like, he's gonna play Paul in Dune, like that was kind of like a weird thing at first. And I could see Denis Villeneuve going for somebody that's a little bit less movie star-ish, but I think what I can't see, and this is what comes to mind, and this isn't the question you asked, but this is the distinction, is I have a hard time seeing him go for a Tom Holland type, because I could see Tom Holland doing a, let's say, like the 007 First Light trailer, the game trailer we just saw, which is like a fun action movie, kind of like in the vein of recent Mission Impossible adventures. It's going to be big. It's going to be fun. It's going to have a lot of excitement and energy, and Bond is going to be a fun, playful character again. I have a hard time seeing Denis Villeneuve doing that. He has never done a movie that falls within the parameters of quote unquote fun in the conventional sense. He is a very intense.
Well, I thought Prisoners was really fun.
Oh, it's an easy Friday night. Bring out the
popcorn flick, no big deal. Watch it with the family. Bring the kids along.
Exactly, right. I'm sure every director wants to do something different. I'm sure Denis Villeneuve wants to do something different by taking on Bond. So I don't want to pigeonhole him too narrowly, but he has a kind of approach that he does, and he's worked with stars who are charismatic. He worked with Ryan Gosling on Blade Runner and things like that, but he's not a jokey director. And I would think Tom Holland, you kind of want a director who's going to be a little bit more playful and have a little bit more fun with the Bond thing, if you're going to make the most of what Tom Holland brings to the table, which is he brings a lot of charm and a lot of natural playfulness. That's his strong suit, right? You could cast Tom Holland and turn him into a serious figure, but you're kind of like robbing yourself of the benefit of casting him if you do that.
Yeah, and I well, that's a really good point. You're doing him a disservice, but I also think you're kind of creating an expectation for the viewer based on that casting. Like you're like, oh, Tom Holland's fun. He's awesome. He's a cool kid. And then it's like you go see the film and you're like, wait a minute, like this is like this dark. That doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like, and I truly believe he could pull off a lot of things, but it's just kind of not that he's typecast, but he's even like whatever movie he did with Mark Wahlberg. It's like he's so big now, Tom Holland, that he's even doing like a one for you, one for me type of thing with studios. It's I just feel like you're just kind of creating a expectation that, because you're right. I don't see Denis casting, somebody like Tom Holland, because I just think that would create an expectation for the audience and for the viewer that would not be his vision for the film.
Exactly. It's the same reason I don't think he would cast Henry Cavill. I just don't think that would be his direction. Denis Villeneuve has said that he thinks Daniel Craig is the ultimate James Bond. That's a verbatim quote that he gave. And I if that's the type that he gravitates towards, a tougher, darker character, and I'm sure Denis Villeneuve's Bond will be different than Daniel Craig's in some ways, but it's like if he wants that sort of credibly dark, like intense character who really looks like they can kill a man. Tom Holland doesn't seem naturally.
Well, and like we'll have a little fun with this.
Yeah.
Take the scene in Quantum of Solace when he's on the airplane and he's had 6 or 7 Vespers.
Yeah.
Do you see Tom Holland in that scene? And don't get me wrong, this has nothing to do with the fact that Tom Holland's sober.
No.
But do you see somebody like Tom Holland playing a very, very damaged, heartbroken, like shell of a human being who's had a shit ton of alcohol, but also still looks like he could absolutely kill you. And that's where Daniel Craig is somebody that has made the comment that James Bond is hard to act because it's a lot of just emulation. It's not so much verbal, it's just emoting. So it's like in that scene, can you see Tom Holland sitting at that bar on an airplane in that scene?
No, I can't. I can't really see him in nearly any of the Daniel Craig scenes. But that one in particular is a really good use case because that feels like the kind of scene that Denis Villeneuve would do in a Bond movie, right? Sure. That feels like a very Denis Villeneuve style thing. Like I would imagine his Bond is going to be a Bond that's a hard living guy in some ways, and that doesn't seem like Tom Holland. That doesn't really seem like Jacob Elordi either, per se. It seems kind of like Harris Dickinson, but I mean, I don't.
Well, of the three, yeah, for sure,
for sure. But I kind of wonder. I kind of wonder if like that list is a list that's floating out there about like preliminary names that they want to make sure that they get in the screen test cycle or at least have meetings with. But I could see Denis Villeneuve being like, look, I just need to get a script in front of me and then we're going to find the best person for the script. And it's the conversations are really like, there are conversations about like who it would be, but like no formal decision is being made until they're getting ready to go. And things could change, right? Like this is the other thing I want people to remember is they were looking at younger people for Casino Royale. The script for Casino Royale was written with a younger Bond in mind. Like Henry Cavill was the runner-up, and he was a young guy in 2006. He was going to be pretty young for Bond. And they were looking at that. Daniel Craig was on the older side of the people they were auditioning for that movie, and he was a little bit older than in some ways they were originally thinking about when they kind of sat down to think about what Casino Royale would be. Not that he was like much older. He was like 36 when they were thinking like 33, but they went with the actor they thought was the best.
Right.
And I think when they get into the weeds with this, everybody's going to want to go with the actor that they feel is the best. Because that's your best shot in making a movie people are going to love, regardless of the buzz you might get by casting a name. But also I have to think Amazon is paying attention to the conversation out there. Like I said, I haven't seen a single positive
way more than Eon ever would have. Yeah.
Right.
Eon did what Eon wanted to do.
Right. And I haven't seen a single positive word about Holland.
No.
I think that would be enough of a pause, at least, to make them seriously think about that. Because it's like it almost seems like overnight the excitement went out of the room. Like Denis Villeneuve was announced, like so many people were excited. Now I've heard people, I was a little bit more reserved, and I know some other people were, but like it seemed like Denis Villeneuve was announced and everybody was like, oh wow, this is like a big name. People are excited. Like Bond is happening, and it's happening with a big director that people like. Let's go. And then this variety story dropped with Tom Holland, Jacob Elordi, and Harris Dickinson, and everybody was like, what? It almost sucked all the air out of the room.
Well, and to your point too, I feel like a story like that comes out completely on purpose. I think that's an Amazon complete move. That's like let's work with Variety and get this out and see what people think. Truly, I mean, that's Hollywood. That's how they do that. And if 1 to 10 being, I think it was a completely, like a partnership between Amazon and Variety, 9.5. I think this is where we're leaning so far. Let's see what people think. And to your point too, I think my post about those three came out maybe maybe the day after the article did, or maybe the day of, and I haven't posted anything about it since. But I still, anytime I check Instagram, there's another comment or two, and it's like, oh, this baby Bond shit and blah blah. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it, and it's not even just Tom Holland. It's the young thing. But the thing is, you can cast young, but you don't have to make them young. It's like if you're casting young for longevity and continuity, somebody like, and I think it is Paul Mescal. Somebody like him, and this is just example of somebody who's already done some big blockbuster movies. He looks the part as like a big, strong, manly dude, X, Y, and Z. Somebody like him would make a lot of sense because he is young. Like, he physically is young, but he can play a little bit older if you need him to. And he just looks like a grown ass man.
Yeah.
Where you can see somebody like him sitting on that bar thinking about things that happened in his past. Now, to get super, Barbara Walters with it, I did allude to the fact that Tom Holland is sober. He became sober because he felt at some point that he had a drinking problem. Now, even somebody as young and innocent
as you said that, I reached for my glass. I'm sorry, Tom. If you're out there, I'm sorry. It was impulse. I'm sorry.
This episode brought to you by Gatorade.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, hey, I'm sure he's fine. But essentially, the point I'm making is he, at his young age, did get himself into a point where he thought, hey, like, I have a problem. I have demon. And, and I haven't done a ton of research on it, so I don't want to speak so deeply on it that I'm completely painting the wrong picture. But to the point where he now owns a non-alcoholic beer company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I can sit here all day and say, well, how would he know how to play somebody who's got trauma? Well, apparently he kind of does. It's taken to the point to where he's gotten sober, and he's, you know what I mean? And he's very vocal about it. Obviously not a trauma like a James Bond would, but it's like, he is a good enough actor to be able to pull from personal experience. So it's like, those types of things can be argued. But when we're going down the path of talking about a scene like on the airplane in Quantum of Solace, somebody might say, well, that was Daniel Craig. That's an older Bond. They're talking about a younger Bond. How could you even compare the two? Well, I think it's valid to compare the two because, like you said, that is a scene that Denis would film.
Yeah.
A lot of his films are very dark. Even if the subject matter isn't dark, that's just how he makes films.
Yeah.
He likes to explore like the human psyche. I mean, I always go back to Prisoners. Hugh Jackman's character arc in that film, is like a very, very deep dive into what the human is capable of, what any person can be forced into doing in any given situation. So you can't expect him to make a very surface level Bond. No. So whether he's making a scene like on Quantum, where this is a 40-something-year-old Bond reflecting on a bunch of trauma and loss and whatever, maybe it's not exactly that, but he is going to have a very emotion-filled, dark Bond. So I think it is valid to still try and place these younger actors in those situations.
I think so too, because I think I can see. I have no idea what Denis Villeneuve's vision is for this movie and what direction he's looking to go, but I could see if you were looking at it from a different perspective, right? If I have my way, Bond starts out as a professional. We don't do another origin story. We don't do anything like that again. We just kind of like pick up as if like the series was in the middle of it and Bond's on another mission and everybody just kind of thumbs up it and we're off to the races. That's kind of left to what Ryan wants the world. That's it. But I can see the logic, especially if you have like an executive board meeting and Denis Villeneuve is pitching it. You just had James Bond die.
Yeah.
You're going to start the series all over again. This is not just a continuation of something that began before. This is the start of a new project, and you have a unique opportunity here to explore something the series has never explored before, which is we've only talked about it. We've only talked about in abstract that Bond lost his parents in a climbing accident. Or we've only talked about in abstract that Bond had a naval career and things like that. To actually say, no, we're going to take a moment and actually say, okay, we're going to start Bond. We're going to establish his world. We are going to establish this character. We are going to look at, what made him become an assassin in a way that is more than what Casino Royale did. Because Casino Royale effectively establishes Bond from the get-go as like, Bond's already committed to being an assassin when Casino Royale starts. Like, that point, like, what does it mean for him to transition from being a naval commander to a 00 or something like that? That's a different story than we've seen before, even though we've kind of seen an origin story.
Sure.
What would that look like? And can we use that to establish him in a new world and pull on things that maybe were really popular? Skyfall was the last huge Bond movie, and that was the Bond movie where Bond went home again. Maybe we could, lean into that a little bit. What does it mean for Bond to have like moved on from that and joined the service and things like that? I could see Denis Villeneuve and the team looking at that and being like, oh, okay, this is our way to kind of establish a new foundation for what a new Bond would be. And that makes sense. And then Bond can just continue to age with this actor, right? Yeah, he might be 29, 30 in the first movie, but the next movie is going to come out 3 years after that. He'll be 33, 34, and then he'll be, 37, 38 in the next one, right? So this proposal makes some sense, and I can honestly see Denis Villeneuve even getting excited about like, oh yeah, I get to like dig into the psychology of Bond a little bit if we do that. I can take that seriously. I can do this really interesting portrait of how Bond picks this mantle up and kind of then open the door to it. And Denis Villeneuve's statement, his publicity statement, was really about like, I'm opening the door to future adventures. And I can see the logic behind that. It's not, I don't need to see another Bond origin story. I don't think Bond, what's most interesting about James Bond is in his origins, but I can see the logic in going that route, and I can see something good coming out of it if it's done the right way. I didn't have a problem with it really in the 007 First Light trailer either, and that's another origin story take that kind of seemed like, okay, like it's not like what I would do, but I can see where you're going with it, and I can see how it's going to start working, and I can get on board. I don't have to be 100% committed to any idea that the Bond series is doing at any time, as long as it's kind of working. I don't know how you feel about that. Like, does that make sense to you? Does that idea, if you look on it on like the bright side, does like an origin story 2.0 hold any merit for you?
It does. It does, because I don't think you cast somebody sub 30 and start it really anywhere else. I just find that really hard to, and that's what a lot of the comments are saying.
Yeah.
The people that are like, how do you cast a 28-year-old and then say he's, already done 15 missions? And, it's like, you don't. That's the thing. I don't think you do. And if you do it, then it really, really depends on who you cast, because you can't cast Tom Holland in that role. Tom Holland's an origin story Bond all day. I don't think you can cast, and that's where like a Paul Mescal, and I'll say it for the last time, I'm not saying he's a choice of mine. I'm just saying looks wise, that's somebody you could believe has been doing it for a few years. Something interesting too, and you touched on it, with Casino Royale being one of Denis' favorite films. I think this is where you gotta know him a little better, which I guarantee you know him better than I do. But is he somebody that would say like, they already did it so well in Casino Royale, I don't want to do that again? Or is it, I loved Casino Royale and I would love to do my spin on a Casino Royale? Because he's obviously doing that with Dune, and he did it with Blade Runner. You know, so he's not like The Godfather should never be remade. He's I'll make my version of that. You know what I mean? So if you really had to dive into it, is he a Casino Royale is untouchable, or is he I love Casino Royale so much I would like a stab at my own origin story?
I'm thinking about that and processing that, because he's obviously not in the room with us to answer for himself. My gut says he would do something similar to it, but not replay it, right? I don't think he would give us Vesper 2.0. I don't think like we would get Vesper again. But I could see him saying, yes, I could do a version of this story that is a little bit different and still brings my stuff to it and still explore parallel territory, so to speak. Right. I don't think he would take that off the table. But at the same time, the Daniel Craig era is still really fresh. Everybody still really remembers what Casino Royale was. Everybody knows what that arc is. And I also think he's smart enough to say, if that was just done, I don't need to redo it again. Right. So I think that's the other question mark. So if that's not what they're doing, what are they doing? I don't know. That's kind of an exciting right. possibility, because like I don't really know. They could be doing anything. Just because Bond's young doesn't mean he's not like in the intelligence community. The thick of it.
Yeah.
Right. I posted this on Instagram today. Not everybody's read this book, but anybody who's watching. The Anthony Horowitz novel Forever and a Day is a prequel to Casino Royale. It's set before then. And that book, I don't think anybody would read that and be like, oh, this book feels like a really serious origin story. It just feels like another Bond adventure. It just happens a little earlier in the timeline. So like they could do that, but it's Denis Villeneuve. He's got to have an angle. Like there's no way this is just like just another Bond movie. Like this is not going to be just another Bond movie. This is going to have some big hook. And I think that's the question mark. If it's not like we're doing the origins of Bond again, what's the hook? Denis Villeneuve and David Heyman and Amy Pascal know where they're going with it. But
yeah. Well, let me ask you this. When they pitch Denis to do a Bond film, do they say, hey, we want you to direct the next Bond film? Or do they say, so we're kind of leaning towards doing an origin story. Are you interested? Do they, because obviously there's no script.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, if there, whoever would, there's just no way. But Amazon probably has an idea of what they would like to see.
Sure.
So if they say, you know, are they saying to him like, hey, we know you're a huge Bond fan, we want you to do this, are you in? Or are they saying, we've got this kind of vision, do you align with it? And then if you do, will you do this with us?
It's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
There was probably an idea that existed before that, because we had heard that Alfonso Cuarón was close enough to the production to have pitched some ideas early on. So like there was some idea floating around in there. And I'm sure once these conversations start, people start sharing their own ideas. So, so they might have started the conversation with, okay, Denis, we're interested. We know you like Bond. What's your idea? And not have like tainted it in any way and just let him go. And maybe he had an idea. And then they might have listened to it and been like, oh, that's interesting. That kind of works with pieces of this idea that we were already thinking about. What do you think about these aspects, and bringing those into your idea? Because it becomes a collaboration at a certain point. And I don't know. I don't know, but I would think that it's really, at this point, they're going to defer to Denis Villeneuve. They're not going to want Denis to walk away, right? Like there's just, he has the power in the room right now, because if he walks away, it doesn't look good for anybody. So, and I'm sure there's like everybody's friends right now, but I'm just saying, I think he's probably conscious of the fact that he is the most important player in the room right now. And is probably going to want to take his time with whoever they hire as the screenwriters. He probably will help write the script himself in some capacity, even if he's just doing a rewrite, to make sure that it's what he wants to do, and then have those conversations from there. So I don't know. It's very interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that Denis Villeneuve's first take would have been like a Bond origin story. So I'm just kind of like trying to piece together all the news we have, like anybody else that's out here.
Yeah,
trying to figure it out. But I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting times that Bond has never had to be rebooted quite this way before. We've never really had like Bond dead and then like relaunching.
It's like you're like in my head. I was gonna say to you, say Bond didn't die in No Time to Die.
Yeah.
Do we even have the conversation of an origin story?
No.
Probably not. But that's where I and this is where I struggle too, because the only thing that is factual in this moment is that Denis is directing the film.
Right.
So outside of, Amy and things like that, but that's where I think to myself, and it's very difficult because of his resume, but does he go in there and say, here's the deal? Like, because when you leave Formula One or you leave Top Gun Maverick, or even Mission Impossible, like, you feel like you're on top of the world.
Sure.
And that's what cinema, in a sense, is for. However, there's also nothing wrong with going and seeing something unbelievably dramatic and just really appreciating the performances and the story and whatever else. But with something like James Bond, it's not like, it's not supposed to be prisoners, and I think of the movie, one of my favorite movies ever is The Lives of Others, if you've ever seen The Lives of Others.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible. Now, that is not a movie you leave the theater on some high.
Yeah, that's not
no, that is a heartbreaking story, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm leaning towards him being in there, and I think you're right. I think they say, what is your idea for a Bond film? And I'm leaning towards him saying, let's get back to Bond kicking ass and people leaving the theater on a high. I don't think he's in there saying, I want to make anything resembling No Time to Die, because you leave the way Casino Royale ended is just flawless. And Skyfall is very similar. And for those to be his two favorite ones, that hints to me what he wants to see. There was no inkling of Bond dying in Skyfall. And Casino Royale was a reboot of just this different take on Bond that just took the world by storm. So I think he probably wants a combination of the two. But I mean, what are your ideas? And I know I've been wanting to ask you this since we started this. What is, if you had to, where do you think he leans story-wise? And not even reboot, just kind of like feel of the film. What do you think he would do?
I think it would be Skyfall 2.0. I really think I think it would be Skyfall 2.0. And by that I mean, again, a visually spectacular sort of epic Bond adventure. He's even worked with Roger Deakins, who shot Skyfall. Maybe we would see Roger Deakins come back, but he's worked with other collaborators too, so it could be anybody. But that same sort of expansive, atmospheric movie that also has some weight to it, right? Skyfall ends on an upbeat note, but there's some dips along the way, right? That's the movie that has Bond kind of tearing up as he's cradling M's body at the end. It's got Bond confronting his like childhood demons in some ways. It has dramatic depth. Bond is also, shot off a bridge and has to like come back. Like there's some stuff there, but it's also having fun with it, right? Javier Bardem is a big, colorful Bond villain in a lot of ways. There's still attempts at humor. I would think it would be that kind of balance, right? There would still be some attempts at humor, at big Bond moments. Let's face it, when directors tend to get a hold of Bond and they've been fans for a long time, they tend to not be able to resist the allure of just like playing with the action figures, so to speak. So like Sam Mendes had to bring back the Goldfinger DB5 just because like he loved that piece from his childhood so much. And I think you're going to see that come out of Denis Villeneuve in a way that you hadn't before. Like he's just grown up with this enough that there's going to be a little bit of that comes out into it. But it's also going to be against the same, like you're still going to see the elements of the director who directed Sicario and like these suspense sequences and probably very like intense moments of violence and characters carrying a lot of dramatic weight, I think would be there too. But I think it's going to hit that sort of Skyfall balance, perhaps more so than Casino Royale, because Casino Royale had that like Martin Campbell action movie energy, which is like really, really like forward moving from like the get-go. Like, you get the battle sequence and then you're in the Madagascar chase and then there's the airport shenanigans and like
your runaway train.
Right. Yeah. I think Skyfall is probably closer to the like rhythm you would get with a Villeneuve Bond movie. But it has to end on an upbeat version, like something like that, because it has to open the door to future adventures, right? Villeneuve is going to know, and he said he's going to know that like he knows he's carrying the burden of a legacy that he has to go beyond him, regardless of whether he does another movie after this. He can't just like do 2 movies with Bond and close the book on it. Like this character has to keep going. So I don't think it's going to be like, a wade through depression. I hope like, I don't think that's what it's going to be, but I do think it's going to have, it's probably going to feel more serious and weighty than say like the 007 First Light trailer. It's gonna feel a little bit more in the Skyfall space, I would say. Does that sound about right to you based on what you've seen?
That makes total sense. And my follow-up to that, and probably the question I think we can probably wrap up on, is with all that said, do you think he's bringing back, like you said, Jenkins or any of these people he's worked with, or do they just continue going after the biggest names? Like, is it a Hoyte van Hoytema thing? Is it a Hans Zimmer thing? Which he's worked with Hans Zimmer, but are they just going to hunt down every giant name and try to make this just the most epic thing ever? Or is it like, hold on, I've made a lot of successful films in my way, let me work with my people? I mean, and you brought up Sicario, and this is kind of adjacent to the question, but one of the things I do like about him too, and this obviously is a very cinematographer, DP type reliant thing, is something like Sicario. Some of those scenes in Sicario were so hyper realistic, they give me anxiety just thinking about them.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, you hired the director, he'll be the first to tell you, I'm only a part of a machine, and these people I've worked with in the past help me make my vision come to reality. So do they allow him to rehire, these people he's worked with, or are they just going to continue down this path of getting literally the biggest names in each department as they go down the call sheet?
I think he's going to get his pick of the litter, whoever he feels comfortable working with, on every decision except for who does the title song. I think the title song is going to be a big pop star name. Whoever it ends up being is going to be somebody that they want.
I have a weird thing. I have a feeling it's going to be Dua Lipa.
I would not be surprised if it is Dua Lipa. Or somebody in that tier that
just
is
like mega arena pop star Brit. Like
that would make sense, right?
Yeah.
Dua Lipa would make perfect sense. They could do any number of ways with that, but I think like that decision is going to be really negotiated.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be, if he wants to bring Zimmer back, because he has a really close working relationship with Hans Zimmer, and they seem to like each other a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Zimmer back. I don't necessarily want to see Zimmer back because I associate Zimmer with the end of the Craig era, right? I kind of want new Bond.
Well, and as good as Final Ascent is, it just makes me want to kill myself. So I don't, I mean, and it might be David Arnold was incredible. Everybody loves David Arnold, but unpopular opinion, I thought Thomas Newman knocked it out of the park with Skyfall. I would love to see Thomas Newman come back.
I do actually think the Skyfall score is really great. And the Spectre one less so, but I chalk that up to that production just being messier. But
just all around. Yeah.
All around messier. But the Skyfall score fits that movie like a glove. I'll be interested to see. I think Denis Villeneuve is going to be smart about who he chooses to bring forward, because I think he also knows that there needs to be a shift in style. It can't just be like 1-to-1 with what we just left off, right? Like, he's worked with Dennis Gassner, the production designer who did a lot of work on the Bond movies that we've seen. So like, whatever he's doing, he's going to have to establish some new vocabulary.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised to see Zimmer come back in particular, because they seem to have a really close working relationship. And Hans Zimmer is the kind of guy who would embrace the challenge of being like, okay, I killed Bond and now I have to find a new way, a new sound for like this new version of Bond. Hans Zimmer would embrace that challenge head on. And I feel like people forget that Hans Zimmer only co-composed the score for No Time to Die. He had a lot of active engagement in it, but he had his collaborator on that, and he's not shy about talking about that in interviews, that score very much being like a co-writing effort. And this would be his opportunity, because he'd have more time to just really lean into what a Bond score could be, as opposed to No Time to Die being kind of like, he came in as the second composer. They had hired a composer. They didn't like what came out of it. And then Hans Zimmer was brought in to kind of save the day. With this film, he would have the opportunity to really sit down and think through deeply about what he wanted a Bond score to be.
Right.
And I could see him doing that. So to answer your question and summarize my response, I think it could be a little bit of both. Like, some people carry over, some people don't. And it's mostly going to be at Denis Villeneuve's.
What would you prefer? What would you prefer?
I would prefer everybody be new. Like, I just kind of like want this production to just have its own feeling. I
new as in not formally Bond related, or new as in
not formally Bond,
not even Denis,
not formally Bond related.
So okay, so it can be Denis pals, but it can't, not prior Bond stat.
Not prior Bond stat, because I think I love Casino Royale, but one of the things that does frustrate me a little bit with Casino Royale is that it doesn't feel like it's quite made a break from the Brosnan years yet, stylistically, in every choice that it's making. And when you get to Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, it just feels like, oh, this is something new. Like, this is something like different, radically different than what we saw before. And I feel like they really should do their best to make sure that when this Bond movie hits, it doesn't just feel like it's picking up where we left off. It should really feel like a new thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, hey, the last thing I'll ask you, when do we find out who the next Bond is? Is it even this year? Is it this summer?
I think it's, my brain says it will be like November.
Okay.
But my heart says it will be closer to September.
Interesting.
I think there's enough momentum and enough conversations happening that it's possible somebody just gets locked in sooner than that. But I think realistically speaking, it's going to take them a while to get that script in place. And
Yeah.
I think it's harder to say that they would be doing that and doing screen tests any sooner than November. And then the other thing is Denis Villeneuve is going to be tied up in Dune shoots at a certain point. So the question is also like, when is he going to be free to do some rounds of
casting? Yeah.
Screen tests? And I think that's a good question. I know Robert Pattinson is tied up in Dune up through like November, and then he's able to jump off and start doing the next Batman movie at that point. But that still raises the question, like Denis Villeneuve is going to be involved in post-production on Dune, like past Christmas. So it's a big question mark. Like, will the actor be early next year? I don't know, but I have a feeling Amazon's going to get a little impatient on that. They're already.
Oh, I would think so.
They're already doing a lot to wait for 2028 for this movie on behalf of Denis Villeneuve. So like, I can see them just wanting to lock an actor in place and get the confirmed.
And they're probably hoping for early 2028. They probably don't want that November 2028 typical release.
Yeah, I would think April, May.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, as always, my friend, you are the expert and a scholar and a gentleman, and I thank you so much.
Credit.
You are the man. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm sure there will be more, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I, of course, will have Ryan back to discuss. But until then, it's been Bond's Apartment. Ryan, analyze this Mr. Bond. I will put his information below. Thank you guys for watching. I'm looking at myself and not the camera. Thank you for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.